Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. Today, we're going to be looking at how third party candidates could impact the results of the 2024 election. So, a lot of people don't really talk about third party candidates, and I haven't really seen people talk about them this cycle, especially. Although there are a couple different people running, such as Jill Stein, who is the Green Party nominee, Chase Oliver, who is the Libertarian Party nominee, and Cornel West, who is basically an independent, but in a few states he's on the ballot as a member of a party but that he created, but in most states he's just an independent. But very few people are actually talking about these other third-party candidates, and it makes sense. None of them have any chance of winning. Best case scenario, they'll probably get 1% of the vote each. There was some talk that maybe there could be a third party candidate that comes up out of nowhere, since people were upset with both Trump and Biden. But RFK did try to do that, but he failed miserably. As you can see here on 538, RFK was polling at about 5% nationwide when he dropped out, and he was actually going down, although not by very much. And I think the highest he ever polled was like 8, 9, 10%. So it's very difficult to run as a third party candidate. And the third party candidates we have this cycle are really not that impressive. The Libertarian nominee has about half the party that hates him. The Green Party nominee, Jill Stein, has a lot of people on the left that, even though they may agree with her on a lot of issues, they don't like that she might split the vote and help Donald Trump beat Kamala, and she's kind of leaned into that as being like, stop Kamala, because of the war in Israel. So a lot of people on the left that may have originally liked Jill Stein have turned on her, although there are some strong supporters of her that are very upset about like the environment and the Israel-Palestine war and things like that. And then Cornel West is kind of the same thing, but to a much smaller scale. So polling suggests that both of these candidates, I mean, all three of these candidates are really struggling. There's a lot of polls that even when they're included, they're still at like 0%. So I would expect all of them to not do very well nationwide, honestly. And we'll look at a couple of polls in a second. But what's really important to look at, and we'll look at as well during the video, is how well they do on election night. If they're getting more a decent percent of the vote, I'm talking like still about 1%, probably less, that's still thousands of votes that could go to either Trump or Kamala. So if they're able to take away small sections of the vote, especially in a very close race like this one is shaping up to be, then they really could matter. So let's look at how they might impact the race nationwide as well as at the state level. So this is national polling for the 2024 election. As you can see, Kamala Harris leads nationwide by about 1.5 points, but that is down from being at almost 3 at the end of September. So this race is very competitive. There was the only poll that included the third-party candidates is actually from like 6 days ago, I believe, and that is New York Times, Siena College. They have Trump up 1 nationwide, and they have Jill Stein, the Green Party nominee, at 2%, and Chase Oliver, the Libertarian, at 0%. And then if you take this poll and you look at the one with just Trump and Harris, they're even. So this pretty much shows that Jill Stein is taking away about 1 point from Kamala Harris nationwide. Like, obviously, this is just one poll, but New York Times is pretty accurate, and that does make sense. I mean, the left-wing candidate is going to take away votes from the other left-wing candidate. Makes sense. If we go down here, there is a CNN poll with likely voters. I'm not going to look at we can look at registered voter poll as well. The registered voter poll has Kamala Harris up by 1, with Chase Oliver at 2% and Jill Stein at 1%. Chase Oliver is the Libertarian nominee, so he is polling about 2%. Jill Stein's at 1, and then Kamala is up by 1 over Trump. With the likely voters, they have the race even, and Chase Oliver is at 2, Jill Stein is at 1. And I don't believe they have a just Trump versus Harris poll, not that I'm seeing. So this is nationwide with the third-party candidates. It's even to Trump plus 1. I mean, Harris plus 1, excuse me. If we come down here, we have another poll from Harris X and Forbes. Trump is up by 1 nationwide, with Cornel West actually at 2% and Jill Stein at 0. There is another poll between registered voters that has Cornel West at 3% and Jill Stein at 1%, but the race is even. So it's very marginal, and I would not like use these polls. What I'm trying to say here is that the polling with third-party candidates is kind of all over the place. There is a clear trend that it helps Trump slightly, because if you look at the polls that are just Trump versus Harris, although they're still very close, except for a couple outliers, Kamala Harris maintains a narrow lead. But then you look at the polls that include the third-party candidates, and outside of a couple outliers, Trump is leading. Trump plus one, Trump plus one, Trump plus one, Trump plus two. This one includes RFK as well for some reason because he is still on the ballot in a couple of states, so he will definitely get some votes, definitely not 2% nationwide. But still, when you include the third-party candidates, Trump at least appears, based on polling, to gain a small advantage. And the third-party candidates aren't taking away much, but they're taking a little bit, 1% here, 1% there, maybe 2%, which I would be stunned if some of them got 2% nationwide, because it's very difficult to poll third-party candidates because a lot of the times people will say they're going to support a third-party candidate, but then it's like you're basically wasting your vote, so they won't actually. And then sometimes you have... So it's very difficult to poll third-party candidates, and because of the nature of the race, we haven't gotten a lot of polls including them. But the little bit of data we do see, it does somewhat nationwide appear to help Trump with the popular vote. And we see this even more so in statewide polls, which we're going to look at right now. In the state of Arizona, if we compare the race between just Trump and Harris, Trump leads by about 2 points. He's up by about 1.8 in the aggregate. And outside of a couple outliers like University of Arizona and Morning Consult, which still have the race within 1, Trump has pretty much led in every single poll since the beginning of October. And if we come down and look at the polls that include third-party candidates, Trump's margin goes down a little bit. He gets 1.2 instead of 1.8. But Kamala Harris is not leading a single poll since the end of September. So once again, less data to look at, might be a little bit less accurate, but it's clear that the third-party candidates being on the ballot, especially Jill Stein, I would assume, does help Trump over Kamala, because when you add the third-party candidates in, the race is either tied or Trump is leading. And I do wish we could have gotten more polls, including the third-party candidates, but like I said, it's a little bit more difficult to gauge that. And because of the race has been kind of all over the place, a lot of pollsters probably aren't even really thinking about it. But it is something to note, because if you look at the race in Arizona, which is a very important swing state, when you include the third-party candidates, there's only, two polls that have Kamala Harris leading this entire cycle. Well, there's some way back in August, but those are kind of, I wouldn't trust polls from that far back. So it's clear that although the margins and the math might be a little bit shaky, third-party candidates are helping Trump in Arizona. In the state of Georgia, we see a similar thing. Trump leads by about 1.5 points over Kamala in the aggregate. He leads in most polls, with a couple still breaking for Kamala. But if we come down and look at the polls that include Cornel West, Jill Stein, and Chase Oliver, Trump's lead actually goes up to 2.4%, almost a point higher. And once again, outside of one poll with registered voters that still has the race within the margin of error, Trump leads in every single poll since late September in the state of Georgia, and even a couple from before, over Kamala. Jill Stein and Chase Oliver are not getting much of the vote, but they're getting about 0.7, 0.8, which I can see that as actually being what they get in the state in terms of the average. But still, it's clear that those small amounts are helping Trump and taking away just a little bit from Kamala Harris. Nevada, we also see it as well at an even bigger level. Trump leads in the aggregate in Nevada by about 0.5. The race, as you can see here, is back and forth, tied. Kamala's up, Trump's up, Kamala's up, tied, Trump's up, Kamala's up, Trump's up. It's going back and forth in Nevada. It's going to be one of the closest states, I think. But then if you go down to the polls that include third-party candidates, Trump still has a lead, but it's only by 0.1. But when you look at the polls since beginning of October, there's only one that has Kamala leading. The rest have Trump up or the race tied. And some of them might not be the best quality, but still, I think there is something to say that if you look at the swing states across the Sun Belt and you look at the national polls, Trump appears to be doing better when you include third-party candidates. And then if we're going to look at the Rust Belt as well, but there's really not a whole lot of data out of the Rust Belt, so we'll just compare how well Trump did in 2016. Not how Trump did, how third-party candidates in 2016 helped in the Rust Belt, because there's a lot of people that say the reason Trump won the states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania was because of Jill Stein getting a large percent of the vote, like compared to past elections, and also center-right people who may not have supported Trump voting for Gary Johnson, the Libertarian nominee in 2016, and then they switched to Biden. So those two factors might have combined helped Trump flip the Rust Belt. So in Wisconsin in 2016, Gary Johnson got about 3.5%. Jill Stein got about 1%. In 2020 in Wisconsin, Jill Stein was not on the ballot. The Green Party did not have ballot access, so that's a whole percent of the vote of left-leaning people that probably broke for Biden. And the Libertarians only got 1.1%. So they had a huge drop off in support for both third-party candidates, and most data we have suggests that those voters broke for Biden instead of Trump. But with Jill Stein on the ballot, with a libertarian on the ballot who's not an independent, because in Wisconsin, for some reason, the Libertarians appeared as independents. Probably some stupid ballot laws. That's every state's different. But the point is that there's going to be probably be more support for third-party candidates in Wisconsin in 2024 than there was in 2020, which that helps Trump, it would appear. If we go to Michigan, we see a very similar story. Jill Stein did very well here. She got about 1.07%. Libertarians also did great here as well. Gary Johnson got about 3.5%. If you want to talk about the war in Gaza, Michigan has a lot of universities. It has a lot of Arab American voters. They're probably going to vote for Jill Stein and the Green Party if they're on the ballot. That takes away votes from Kamala Harris. The Libertarians, they're probably going to get a decent percent. Let's see what they got in 2020. So in 2020 in Michigan, the Green Party got 0.25%. The Libertarians got about 1%. They'll probably match that. I think the Green Party will do better, although the Libertarians will both probably be about 1%. Maybe the Greens will be a little bit lower. But still, that's thousands of votes that will go to the Green Party and Jill Stein that could have gone to Kamala Harris. And the last state is Pennsylvania. This one is a little bit less, I'd say, important in terms of the third-party vote, not because it's not an important state, just because even in 2016 when third-party votes were at an all-time high, there were still less in Pennsylvania. The Libertarian Gary Johnson got about 2.4%. The Greens got about 0.8%. So this is a pretty big drop-off compared to states like Michigan and Wisconsin. But still, this is 146,000 votes in a state that was decided by 50,000 votes in 2016, and in 2020 by about 70,000 votes. We come down here and look at the 2020 results, and there was no Green Party on the ballot. Libertarians got about 1.1%. So if we assume that the people in Pennsylvania who backed the Green Party in 2016, they voted probably for Joe Biden in 2020 because there was no option to vote Green Party. These are people who are firmly on the left, and many of them are probably very interested in the environment and the Gaza war. With Jill Stein on the ballot again in Pennsylvania, there is a serious chance she won't get this high percent. I would be stunned, but she could get 0.5%. And if so, that's 0.5% that's going away from Kamala Harris, and it helps Donald Trump. So once again, I would not suggest using this as a great way to predict the election, but I would suggest looking at how well on election night, how well the third parties are doing. If they're getting a good percentage of the vote, especially Jill Stein in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, it's probably going to help Trump. It's probably a good sign for Trump. Vice versa, if they're getting very low percentages, it might be more beneficial for Kamala Harris. So with that, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like and subscribe for more.